Revelers, this is Off the Rails, Right versus Left, the podcast that we do because we think the left is evil. I'm Rob B.
And I'm Brad Lee.
And I'm Brian G.
And we are Off the Rails, Right versus Left. Again, we're doing this show because we think everybody needs to know that the left is evil.
Classic.
Welcome, Revelers. This is Off the Rails, Right versus Left. I'm Rob B. Unfortunately, the other guys are still doing their thing because it's a little early in the day for them. But we are continuing with our series of candidates for the 2024 election. Today, we're going to be starting off our series of interviews with Analisa Roche. She is the write-in candidate. She's actually going for the spot that, of course, the media only covers Ted Cruz and Colin Allred. But as you know from watching the channel here, there are other candidates. We've already interviewed Ted Brown and Tracy Andress. Dr. Andress was on the other day on Monday. And now we have Analisa Roche. She's the other independent candidate, and she's another write-in candidate as well. So that makes her battle a little bit harder. So Analisa, can you hear me here?
I sure can.
Okay, great. Let me see if I can kill the music. I forgot to kill the music because we went into the intro. There we go. All right. So Analisa, you want to give a little introduction to yourself because, you know, the two main candidates, we already know who they are from the House and the Senate. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running?
All right. Yeah. And strangely, I wasn't invited to the debate they had yesterday.
Yeah, I noticed that. They didn't invite Ted Brown or Dr. Andrus either.
Correct. Yeah, I'm Analisa Roche. I'm an almost lifelong Texan, married for 28 years, mom of 4 young adults, graduated from homeschooling them in May. My youngest thinks he graduated, but I kind of think I did too. And I am currently a math tutor, and I am also looking to help facilitate some change in our politics.
Okay, well, that's great. I'm all about change, and as I kind of indicated to you when I was asking you to come and do the interview with me, is being a libertarian myself. I absolutely hate the duopoly that the Republican and Democratic parties have. And, you know, our country was never intended to be a two-party system, but that's kind of how it ended up. And then when Ross Perot threatened that two-party system, both sides colluded to try and keep it from ever happening again.
Absolutely. I am very committed to the idea of open primaries, ranked choice voting, various other reforms that would allow a multi-party system to flourish.
Absolutely. So now as far as getting into the issues, because obviously you're looking at being able to present and vote on legislation in the United States Senate. So we kind of need to know where you stand on things. So the number one issue,
Absolutely,
the number one issue, according to voters in this election, is the economy. So what would you do to fix this mess our economy is in? And I do like to preface one part of it because people don't really realize we're in a recession economy. The inflation has been ahead of the GDP growth by 7% this entire administration. So we have been in a recession. The actual real products being produced and sold and the real work being done is down 7%, no matter how they manipulate the numbers. So that being said, since we're stuck in an inflation hidden recession, what legislation would you put forward to help fix that?
My top priority would be to use the. Oh. I don't know. Did you? Am I here?
You're here now.
Okay. My Wi-Fi is sometimes iffy. I apologize. My top priority would be to use the investigative powers of the Senate to do a thorough audit of government spending in general. There's tons of inefficiencies in there, and I want to find them and root them out so that we can afford to make some other reforms. Primarily, I believe that we are lacking in economic justice for much of our population. People who are hungry, people who are unhoused, people who are underemployed or unemployed and looking for work. And so the child tax credit, the efforts towards helping subsidize housing for people who can't afford it, and other methods that would help underprivileged members of society access the same resources others have.
Okay. So in response to that, I would ask, because, well, beyond the auditing, let's address what you said about the auditing first. So if you're talking about the auditing process, yeah, the Congress does have an oversight, not just authority but responsibility. But every time they turn up dirt, like if you look at some of the investigations going on, they've turned up tons of wrongdoing, and yet nothing happens from it.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
what kind of mechanism, whether even if it's through introducing legislation, because Congress always exempts himself from legislation.
Right.
So I'd like to see some legislation introduced that holds members of Congress and members of the, both the House and the Senate accountable.
Yeah, sign me up for that.
Okay.
One of the ways, I'll sponsor it. One of the ways that I intend to not just hold members accountable, but also just encourage anything to happen in Congress is to work with others well. There is so much common ground between the two major parties that we don't hear about. And the two major parties are so concerned with maintaining their power that too much of their time and energy goes into kind of fomenting this divisiveness. And so I am encouraging people to vote for someone who is willing to work with others. And a big part of that would be acting on the results of such an audit. It would be forming coalitions and having conversations that are not angry and resentful, and finding the common ground that we have with each other.
Okay. I would throw in there at the beginning of your search, a good place to start looking at your audits, and this is Congress doing it. There's 450 full-blown agencies in the United States government and up to 5,000 government agency offices, and they all cover such a wide range of topics, from environment to housing to all of this. But they're not really responsibilities annotated by the Constitution to the federal government. So as you're looking at that, I think cutting out agencies that were never intended to be part of the federal government would be a good place to start.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And part of my platform is the importance of subsidiarity. So the smallest group possible that can be effective is what should be as local as possible, is what should be handling as many issues as possible.
Okay. I mean, I can get 100% on board with that. So yeah, I think the biggest problem that we have, and it's led to a $35 trillion deficit, is the fact that the government's too big. Now, in that, you mentioned subsidies for housing. Sounds great, but every time well, okay, before I dig into it so big, I just want you, if you can, give me an example of anything that the United States government has ever done well.
COVID vaccines.
Right. So would that be the part where they hid the data? Or would that be the part where they tried to do an unconstitutional mandate? Or would
So
that be
we
wait?
probably.
I'm
Oh,
not
okay.
quite
Go
done with
ahead.
it. I'm not quite done with the question
Sure. Go ahead.
because you brought it up.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
or would that be the part where members of Congress gave the pharmaceutical companies immunity from lawsuits while buying stock in the pharmaceutical companies? So which part was the federal government doing well?
So is it multiple choice or can I choose other?
Oh, you can do whatever you like, but all three of those areas to me would be like, that's your example of what they did well, and those are two very, very clear avenues that they didn't really do well.
So I was referring very specifically to the speed with which vaccines were created and distributed, which is unprecedented, of course.
I would agree. But if you look at the VAERS reporting, it seems like they achieved that speed by cutting corners with safety. That's the way it looks.
I guess that's a conversation about VAERS, but
Well, for anybody listening, if you don't know what VAERS is, that's the vaccine incident reporting system where people report injury from it, and after blocking some of the reports from VAERS, they've now done a study of something like 1.7 million kids that took the vaccine, and myocarditis is now showing up in kids, which it never really did before the vaccine. So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about.
yes,
And it probably just got kicked off of YouTube for that one, but that is what is happening. And just for the YouTube censors, it is in the CDC guidelines, it is in the CDC data, and it's in the Department of Health data. So there's no misinformation going on. Okay, anyway, go ahead.
All right, well done. I think you've covered your bases, hopefully. VAERS is a system which anyone can report into. And so you have a huge variety of individuals who don't always, I'm certainly not saying never, but don't always know that the things they're reporting are directly attributable to the causes to which they are attributing them. I absolutely agree with your concern about such things as myocarditis, and for that reason, my sons do not get the COVID vaccine. So I don't remember exactly where we're going with this, but
well, no. So my more issue on that wasn't even about the process for the vaccines. It was the fact that yes, they had a goal, but I wouldn't say that it was successful. If you understand what I mean, because
yes, I do. You're saying the drawbacks outweighed the advantages.
Yeah, especially since they knew from the beginning that all respiratory viruses mutate rapidly, and any vaccine wasn't going to have long-term efficacy. And yet everything that they said in their program denied everything they've known about every respiratory virus since the beginning of time in vaccines. If you get what I'm saying.
I do. I think I do. I would like to see some citations on what you are, I'm going to sound redundant, but what you're citing. My opinion of kind of the big picture situation of the COVID vaccine was that the money put into the research for developing it quickly and pushing it out quickly was money well spent, because I firmly believe there were more lives saved than the drawbacks that we've had. And I do not say that to minimize those drawbacks. I absolutely agree with you that there are concerns that go along with that.
Okay, so without delving too far into that, because it's not really what I wanted to talk about, I just wanted to point out that the government really doesn't do anything well. Even when they throw the full weight of the government behind it, they still messed up all over the place. They approved vaccines that have literally been pulled by the company themselves because they were deadly.
Yes.
And the reason they got approved is because all the people in the FDA get kickbacks for approving drugs, but they don't get a kickback if they decline them.
my husband works for a drug research company, research now, and he works directly with the FDA on a regular basis, and it has not been our experience that that is always the case.
Yeah, regulators shouldn't be working with the people they're regulating at all.
By working with, I mean he files for approval. That's a fair point.
Yeah, but yeah, they shouldn't be working together. But actually, the data that's come up through the oversight investigation is they are actually working together hand in hand, and that's
Yeah,
all part.
I'd
That's
love
all
to
part
see
of the
that
congressional.
information.
Yeah,
That's
it's all
very
part of the
concerning.
congressional records, and a large part of the hearings on it are actually available on online if you go to the Senate warehouse, the Senate website or the House website. So, but my bigger point
Uh-huh.
was massive amount of money was dumped into that for an mRNA vaccine that they had actually developed decades ago. The technology was not new. They had already developed it. They just kind of tooled it in for this.
Correct, yeah.
They skipped over a lot of processes that they should have followed to try and expedite it. For a respiratory virus that had minimal impact, they ignored much of the data. And so it was just the governmenting for the sake of governmenting. If you get what I'm saying. Okay.
Yeah.
So then when you talk about attacking homelessness, the federal government spent over $1 trillion to address homelessness and housing. They can't do it. The federal government cannot fix the problem.
I would agree with you that that is more of a local situation, that
Yeah,
is more better solved locally.
And putting federal funding into anything guarantees that at least half of that's going to be lost to payoffs and broken contracts and everything else.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, how many billion have been spent for the internet and they took it away from the one person who could do it for politics? And nobody has been provided with internet after billions of dollars spent. They built 7 charging stations for billions of dollars, stuff like that. So the idea that the government's gonna fix anything is one thing that I push back a little bit. And as an independent candidate, since you're not going to be beholden to either party, I hope you bear that in mind. There is not a single example of anything that the United States government has done well for the last 100 years.
You've given me a good challenge. I'll see if I can find something, but I appreciate the point.
Okay, so and then next on that for the next topic, because I didn't even mean to talk about the whole pandemic or any of that, but it really is a great example of the government proving its futility and kind of governmenting for the sake of governmenting. And and again, I would hope that you would be for pushing 2 things: term limits.
Heck yes.
In Congress.
Heck yes.
Another amendment that I'd be great because we're gonna talk a little more about the taxes part of the economy. Also, an amendment that says Congress cannot exempt themselves from any law like they did for the Affordable Care Act. Of course, they don't understand how bad it is. They don't have to live under it.
Correct.
Like they say, oh, millions of people are provided health insurance. Yeah, that's great. Me personally, like, it's more affordable for me to not be insured at all unless something catastrophic happens.
Right.
Because it's
right.
just
You're playing
ridiculous.
You're playing
because anything that I pay for under the new system, they're not going to pay anything for until I get to like $20,000 anyway.
Yeah, that's what a lot of us with private health insurance are dealing with as well. It's just a mess.
Right. So so this is a good point to transition into the no, we'll do the taxes and then we'll come back to healthcare.
Okay.
So that's the other part. That's the other part of the economy is out of control taxes. And my baseline for taxes is this country existed for 150 years without an employment tax. The employment tax was introduced as a temporary tax to fund World War I. That was 100 years ago.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a temporary tax, right?
Right. But we need to unpermanent these taxes because it's ridiculous.
Sure.
So, and then like another tax, the Social Security tax, is being paid into a fund that was intended to be a just in case catch for people that have something go wrong, inspired by, people's savings getting wiped out by the Great Depression. But now it's become a thing that everybody gets, and I've even seen, former presidents with millions of dollars in assets getting Social Security. So
Yeah.
so then that makes it feel like a tax is not right, and now we're paying taxes to have immigrants who aren't part of the system aren't paying into the system, getting stuff out of the system. So even though that's kind of Social Security separate, it is a tax. So how do we fix the whole tax problem?
Well, that's a very big question. I will name just a couple of things that I think of as priorities there. I would love in the long term to see a complete overhaul of the tax system. I think that it just grows bigger and messier and more confusing and less efficient. Every single year, you have to keep up with the latest changes to do your own taxes. I think it's ridiculous that most people who have the means choose not to do their own taxes because it's so complicated. I'm self-employed. That complicates my taxes. I'm still trying to do them all myself because it's just on principle, I don't feel like I should have to pay someone else to do it. I know that if I were willing to pay someone else, I'd probably get a lot more tax breaks than I get. Which, that points out another problem, right? That this just should not be this complicated. But I like the temporary taxes, and I use the word temporary in quotes, things don't tend to get less complicated, right? And so you kind of have to start from the ground up. But I also recognize that we're a huge variety of people country. And so starting anything from the ground is going to be a Herculean task. And so I honestly don't know what the answer is. I think that my mindset would be beneficial, and I would encourage others to have it, that we must constantly, ruthlessly eliminate inefficiencies. We must look very carefully and skeptically at new taxes and what they're doing. And we need good, reliable data that is not mired in conflicts of interest.
Right. So, and I want to throw out something that's like kind of neither really here nor there, but kind of a proposal for how to fix that.
Tell me.
So in Russia, there are no tax lawyers. The reason there are no tax lawyers is because the tax is simple.
Yeah.
If you earn money, 15% of it goes to the government.
Yeah.
That's for governments. That's for people. There are no people to get welfare off of the tax system. If they need support, there's programs for that. They don't have the, welfare via the tax system.
That's very interesting.
Which is what child tax credits and earned income credits for people who aren't even working is welfare.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean it does. So, up until they started this war in Ukraine, they had built up billions of dollars in reserves while under sanctions.
That's very interesting.
So, and why? Because all the neighboring countries around them wanted to do business there. Because, some of the countries around them, they had to give 50% of their business to the president, or
right.
They had ridiculous tax codes or whatever. But the reason so many American companies, for example, were doing business in Russia was the taxes were simple. Yes. 85% of your profits were yours to keep.
Yes.
That incentivizes business, and
Absolutely.
growing business means hiring more people, and having more people hired mean they're paying 15% too.
Right.
But the way we break up the tax code and have it so progressive, like we tend to penalize people and companies for being more successful instead of keeping everything simple. Now, along with this, it would also get rid of every single write-off.
Right, which is what I'm talking about as being problematic, that, other people can get those, but I don't know about them.
Yeah. So, and then enforceability of the law regarding the tax code is a lot easier. I'm surprised I don't see more cases of it because, nowadays they try and say, ignorance of the law is no excuse, but that's not how it's supposed to be.
Right.
Like, there's supposed to be the component of mens rea, meaning intent to commit a crime.
Right.
And if you don't know the law, how would you commit a crime? And if
Yep.
you watch and if you watch any legal proceeding regarding tax law, nobody knows the law.
I try not to.
Yeah, but nobody so nobody knows the law. Like
Right,
nobody knows
exactly.
every federal code for the
Exactly.
IRS. IRS agents don't know it all.
Absolutely.
So,
You couldn't.
yeah. So, but that's, and again, if we had just a 15% tax code with electronic transmission and all of that, we could probably have 1,000 people working in the IRS, and we wouldn't need 87,000 more agents to add to the 187,000 agents or employees they already have to make it 250,000 people to come in, rob the American people with threats of violence, because that's what it is. If you don't give the government the money they're demanding, they're going to throw you in jail at gunpoint and take your stuff. That's robbery. So maybe if we make it nice and simple, hey, everybody does an equal share, and then we'll never have to hear again how people are paying 38% taxes, aren't paying their fair share.
Yeah.
That's something I don't get.
Yeah.
So, okay. So on to healthcare. So there is a mess in healthcare. And I have my solutions. I don't know if you've seen any of the other interviews I've done, because my solution is out there. I make sure everybody knows it before they go to Congress, if they're going to Congress.
I'd love to hear it. I have not seen it.
So, but I'll let you go first.
Okay.
What we do to address the spiraling costs of healthcare. Yeah, that's just it. Spiraling costs, and it's actually kind of the spiraling costs are now beginning to impact the availability, which is going to drive up the costs even more because
Absolutely.
it's pushing people from going into medicine.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Like the tax system, the healthcare system is too big and complicated and inefficient. I have 2 chronically ill children out of my 4, and I have spent a significant portion of my time in the last 20 years trying to advocate for their care and paying more and more money for it. I have seen jobs that didn't exist, such as coders, being added to the healthcare system, which that was never a thing in the past, but now it's so complicated. We need to have codes that are read by the insurance company, and everything has to have a code, and so again, it needs an overhaul. I realize we are not likely to agree on my preferred solution, but I would prefer a single payer system that did not depend on employers. My husband works for an 8-person company. The healthcare we qualify for as an 8-person company is crap compared to what the bigger companies qualify for. And to me, that's ridiculous.
Okay. So we have single payer healthcare in this country.
Well, maybe we have a terminology issue then. Tell me what you mean by that.
The VA is single payer healthcare. If you're going to make any sort of argument that that's functional, I don't know what you're seeing.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I undoubtedly have a lot to learn about all the particular situations. But I wonder if you would agree with me that having it depend on your employer is problematic.
No, because it's not dependent on your employer. That is a benefit that your employer offers.
Okay.
In order for you to work there. What tied it to your employers was the Affordable Care Act. Before that, that was a benefit that was part of your compensation package. So when you're negotiating, okay, no, I want 100% of my healthcare paid. Now that's not even a negotiating tool. The government took it away by saying your healthcare has to come through your employer.
Yeah, that's problematic.
So what happened? The government got involved and made it worse. The government started taking control of the markets, and what up? All the prices went up. My fiance, I'm getting married next month. She's an overnight nurse, and at her hospital, they had one thing that was reported on them incorrectly, and they now spend 90% of their time filling out paperwork
Oh, yeah.
and not taking care of customers.
Yeah, I
So this
volunteer
is,
in the NICU. I see it all the time.
and why? Because if they don't do this, they're not going to get Medicare, and they're not going to get any payments from any of the funds that are funded by the Affordable Care Act.
So tell me your solution.
100% privatization. And there's actually something kind of interesting, and it actually hits two forms of insurance. Okay. What's the number one thing that drives down price?
Numbers.
Supply and competition.
Yeah.
And yet we will not let an insurance company provide insurance across the country. We will not let, whether it's auto insurance or health insurance
Or homeowners.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and what you end up seeing is when you get your Blue Cross Blue Shield, it says Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas, because
You
Blue
bet.
Cross Blue Shield had to start an entire company, go through all the expense of running a parallel program in the state, because they're not allowed to compete in between states. So
Right.
that's number one.
Right.
Number two, have you noticed that independent doctors are disappearing? They're all part of a network or part of a chain of
Oh, heck
offices.
yes.
Do
Yeah.
you know why that is?
Tell me.
Malpractice insurance.
Oh, gosh. I've got a friend who's an oncologist, and that's a huge expense of hers.
Almost 80% of their expenses is malpractice insurance.
Yeah, it's insane.
Why is it so insane? The refusal by a bunch of lawyers in Congress to pass tort reform. Limit damages to actual damage plus 100%. And you're going to see healthcare prices come tumbling, because now, instead of paying, a hospital paying millions,
Yep.
or billions for some of these chains in malpractice insurance, that'll bring that down to millions, and their baseline costs go down.
Yeah, that's plausible. Absolutely.
Yeah, people wonder why it's so expensive to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
Because everybody who goes there is in a serious situation, so more people die there, and they get sued more than anybody else. They're not charging They're not charging $700 for an aspirin. They're charging $700 for an aspirin because they get sued every time somebody comes to the hospital and dies.
Yes.
Because they were dying.
Yes. Absolutely.
So, and then like tons of money goes out to frivolous lawsuits and this stuff, because it ends up being cheaper for the malpractice insurance provider to just settle the cases rather than fight the cases.
Yep.
Which means it's still money going out when no money should be going out. So we need tort reform across the board. And
100%.
I think we need that on everything. The sole role of the federal government is to protect the people. And that's from each other and from outside sources. And in that case, people being predatory, seeking compensation for damages that didn't happen, to me, it's just another form of theft. And that's one of the things the federal government is actually supposed to do. They're not supposed to join in and gang up on people
Sure.
for the theft. But
Right.
that seems to be the solution right now with everything in government is, well, the government should. No, the government shouldn't. Because when everything started going really, really bad in this country is when the government started getting really, really involved in stuff. Back when we had the wannabe dictator Roosevelt insert the federal government into everything.
Interesting.
You follow what I'm saying?
I do.
So, but again, that's going to be a hard press, because all these people in the Senate, if they ever don't get elected, they're going to go back to being lawyers.
Yep.
So they don't want to limit their earnings when they get out of office.
Sure.
So that's why we do need the caps, and they cannot exempt themselves from any law, and they can't pass a law that benefits themselves.
I'm on board with you.
And I think the penalty for a member of Congress who is found guilty of doing that should actually be tried for treason. Because if you knowingly hurt the entire United States, that's treason.
I bet you could find a lawyer to make that case.
I guarantee you could. So, okay. So that's where I look at healthcare. And again, it's like my viewpoint. I'm a libertarian.
Yes.
And whether it's Republican, Democrat, Independent, everybody thinks the government has the solution. But to me, I mean, in the last 10 years, the U.S. military has lost $1 trillion. Why is that the entity that you would want in charge of anything?
Admittedly, you're making good points, but you are interviewing candidates for government offices. So we are going to have a bias that we can do some good.
Yeah, well, but you could do the good by returning the federal government to the state it was intended to be, which is as limited of interference in people's life as possible.
Yeah, I think we have lots of points of agreement on that.
Yeah. So and that's the point. Like, I don't want candidates to have a government solution. I want the candidates to have solutions for the problems. And most of these problems, as we're seeing, the solution to the problem is getting the government out of it.
Gotcha.
They should maintain a fair marketplace, not be in the marketplace. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Gun control.
Is that a question?
That is a question. Because before I say my point, I'm going to let you say your point.
Okay. I want to start this conversation with a point that I'm sure all of your listeners will agree with, which is that mass shootings are a problem in this country, and that every human life lost in one is a deep tragedy.
Okay.
And
so what's your solution?
Yes. So this is something that I have thought a lot about, and what it always comes back to for me is loopholes in regulation, and I'm sure we won't agree on that. But
so I'm gonna pause you right there for 1 second.
Okay.
And there's a very specific reason for it.
Okay.
And as a libertarian,
yes,
you know what I'm about to do, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So the Second Amendment of the Constitution is very much unlike every other part of the Constitution, including the Bill of Rights. Okay. There is no right stated in the Second Amendment. Okay. The verbiage of the Second Amendment is a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Yes.
Okay. I say that because it doesn't say anything about it granting a right. It says the right is there and the government can't pass a law about it. So even the NFA is illegal. And it didn't ban anything. It just made it so ridiculously expensive that I can't own a machine gun, but rich people can. That's all it did. Because you can pay an extra stamp, and they banned the manufacturer in this country for private citizens. But guess what? We didn't have mass shootings before the NFA when everybody was able to buy machine guns. You know what I mean? So yes. now I do want to ask if you're into the assault weapon hype.
Define your term for me.
Well, a lot of people go out there espousing that we should ban an assault weapon.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree that those should be banned. Yeah.
Okay. So define an assault weapon since you're the one that wants to ban it. Because I'm about to show you an assault weapon and explain what most people who are for an assault weapon ban don't understand.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think of assault weapons as high magazine capacity. Oh my goodness.
Well, probably
you got my attention.
So probably something that looks like this. Right?
I don't know a lot about what guns look like, but I'll take your word for it.
That's what's going to look like every time you look for a picture of an assault weapon.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that does look like something you'd see. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now here's the problem with that idea. Okay. A regular hunting rifle, because this is not classified as an AR. There's no such thing as an assault rifle. AR stands for Armalite Rifle. That's the company that made the rifle. When they say an AK style rifle, AK stands for Alexander Kalichnikov, the inventor of the Kalichnikov rifle.
Yes.
Okay. So what most people are thinking is that this is a machine gun. I pull the trigger and it just keeps spraying bullets.
Yeah, I don't know because I don't know what they look like.
Yeah. So, well, no, that's the general assumption. So I've had this conversation before. That's why I'm pointing it. Okay. So if I pull this trigger one time and leave it squeezed, one bullet comes out,
Great.
just like every other gun. And yet this in Washington State is illegal because of their assault weapons ban. Do you know why? The
Tell me.
completely arbitrary folding stock.
Oh, yes. Right.
But all this does is make it so if my fiance is shooting it, she doesn't have to be out like this to shoot
Right.
it.
Right.
That's all it does. Has nothing to do with it. The extended magazine, well, it's an interesting idea to say that somebody needs a limited amount of magazines. If you're one-on-one with somebody, you might only need 6 rounds, 8 rounds.
Of course. Yeah.
What if you're being accosted by like 30 people? If you look at 2020 and the crap that's going on in California with criminal mobs mobbing up on stores, you can't make the argument that your life may not saving your life may not require being able to take on a large range of people, and you're going to need more than 6 bullets. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So now here's the thing. There are 400 million guns in this country, including 200 million of these. Did you know more people die by hammer than by owl rifles, including assault rifles?
I didn't. I'd love to see that. That's fascinating.
Yes. So almost nobody is killed by rifles. How people are really killed is by handguns, and mostly in cities where handguns are already banned. So telling criminals that there's a new law that they can't have a ban isn't going to make them magically follow the law. And even in England, where they have an island that they can control their borders tightly, you walk through the bad parts, everybody's got guns. And that's with a complete ban. So, and then there was also, after England did the assault ban, there was a guy named Ludi who made a gun from stuff you can buy at a hardware store. And he actually made a fully automatic machine gun out of it.
That's terrifying.
Why?
Well, yeah, fair question. It's
So
terrifying if he has-
I'll point out something. Our military guns, our machine guns that are actually machine guns, you know, our military almost never uses them in full machine gun mode, right?
I would assume.
Yeah, because hitting somebody doing full automatic fire is kind of an accident because you cannot control the gun firing continuously.
Yeah, that's entirely plausible to me.
So it fires 1 round or 3 round bursts. So the argument, weapons of war, yeah, that's fully automatic, which unless you have $40,000 to buy the gun, you can't buy one. This was $400.
I was going to ask you what it cost, just point of
Yeah,
curiosity.
it's $400, and this is for home defense. And it fires a 5.56 round. I can take down a deer with that. And the bullets aren't particularly scary. That's it. All of this is powder. The tip is only this big. Not really any bigger than the tip of a pistol bullet.
Well, it's not about the tip, right? It's about the explosiveness.
Nope. It's about the tip. So when you hear people talk about the damage that bullets do to bodies, a hollow point expands and does the most damage to the body.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Yes. Do you know why you carry a hollow point?
I don't know.
So it stops in the person you intend to shoot, so it doesn't shoot the innocent person behind them.
Okay, that makes sense because it expands in the body and doesn't go further because it's expended its energy then.
Because, so what people who own guns and use guns understand, you're responsible for every bullet that comes out of your gun.
Yes.
So while I may target, these are loaded up for target shooting because we're getting ready to go target shooting. I got my fiance a new gun. She's got an AR style 22 rifle. So she's going to practice with that. Okay. So some want to get rid of hollow points, but then that means you have the tips like this that will go through almost anything it shoots.
Right. So it keeps going.
Right. And the reason why it has extra powder isn't to do more damage. It's to get more range.
Go further. Yeah.
Yeah. Good luck sneaking up on a deer and getting it to hold your hand while you shoot it.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yes, of course.
So, and then most importantly, the reason for the Second Amendment is because our entire Revolutionary War was fought by private citizens using their own guns.
Right.
The governor called on them to come and help fight the war, and they came with their own guns. Okay, we
Yes.
have a million. We have what, 1 million between standing army and reserve. I was right.
Good job.
No, I just said I was right because YouTube just removed the video.
Are you serious?
Yeah, that's YouTube. So it's fine. I'm used to it. I'm always fighting with them. I regularly have to remind them in Texas we are allowed to sue social media companies for censorship, and they
It's a
usually remove the
conversation. It's
strikes.
ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially since I didn't really get into all the like controversial stuff about the C word. So yeah, there it went. We just went offline. So don't worry, we're still on Twitter, and we're still on Rumble. I love Rumble because they don't censor anything. Same thing with Twitter. Anyway, so the point of all that, there are 400 million guns in this country. Okay, but we don't have 400 million mass shootings. So that tells you it's not guns committing mass shootings. Okay, more people die by car than by shooting.
Sure.
And something like 60% of the numbers for deaths in this country are actually people auto-deleting that will do it another way. If you follow what I'm saying. You can't say the actual word.
Right. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So they're removing themselves from the gene pool.
Yeah.
Whether it's accidental or intentional. Do you follow what I'm saying? So,
I follow what you're saying, yeah.
And then almost all of the rest of the deaths by gun violence are carried out by pistols in cities that are run by Democrats where guns are banned. So apparently banning guns doesn't stop the violence. So then we need to take a real look at what the problem is. And that would be, why are people thinking it's okay to do this stuff? And
I absolutely agree. That's the most important factor.
And with the exception of people like the Unabomber, all these people around people and nobody notice, or they do notice, and when it's brought to the attention, nobody does anything.
I think that's a big problem in school shootings.
Yeah. So and then I have big questions where some of these people get the weapons for this stuff, because like the Uvalde place, I don't know if you know the price of guns and ammunition, but that dude had like $4,000 worth of guns and like probably $10,000 worth of ammunition.
Yeah.
And his whole work experience was 3 months working at Burger King or something like that, and that's not going to pay for
how
those
did he
guns.
do it? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's other issues going on around this, but the first and foremost is, why are we not protecting the schools? Like, if we build a vault in a bank and put armed guards out front, I think our kids are more valuable than anything in a vault.
Yeah, absolutely.
They control the entrance and exit from court buildings, and I'm sorry to any judges or any other public officials out there, our kids are more important than bureaucrats. So if we can provide the safety for them, we need to provide it for the schools as well. I talked to a candidate for the school boards that I also pointed out we need to stop having the counselors doing schedule work that should be done by the office administrators.
Heck yes.
And have them actually talking to students to try and find this stuff.
Yep. They don't have time. That's right. Test administration, everything else.
Yeah. And that's not a counselor. So we do need mental health resources in the schools.
Correct.
And we also talked about a bunch of other stuff that needs to be done. But again, that's not something I think the federal government should be involved in, because
that's a local issue.
Yeah, before who was it? Johnson created the Department of Education. We were number 1 in the world in education. Now we're like 50th.
Yeah, it's not
with
great.
The federal government involved. Kind of backs up my point that the federal government doesn't do anything well. Anyway,
it does.
It's almost like I'm like onto something here.
Like it all comes together.
Okay. So now, bearing that in mind, Because I can tell you live in Texas, so I know you're not going to get even anybody in your own state to go along with banning guns. So now looking at it from a different perspective, what's an idea that we can come up with for legislation to stop it? And we can't say unconstitutional like red flag laws either, but there should be a lot more resources for stuff like that. If you get what I mean.
Yeah, we agree that that's where the most important focus is. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I wanted to bring that up because like even now they don't even say it's about Second Amendment. They just say it's about gun violence, but then all of the proposals won't stop gun violence. And like none of these school shootings, the people like committing the gun violence didn't have the gun legally to begin with. Especially if it was a kid committed it, because no kid can buy a gun.
Right.
So again, we're back to illegal guns can be obtained. So punishing people that follow the law is not going to stop the bad stuff.
I appreciate your perspective.
Yeah, but that's what it really breaks down to, because banning it's not going to take it away from the criminals, especially when you go to all these same cities that have the worst gun crime. They also have prosecution policies that they don't prosecute people who commit gun crimes. So it's bizarre to me. So, but yeah, I think there's a cultural problem in the United States.
Absolutely.
And that's what we need to address. And that's that we value life.
Absolutely.
So, now, since we're talking about valuing life, why don't we mention a little bit about abortion? By the way, I don't have anybody scheduled until 6:30, so we can talk as long as you want. But if you have to go, I also understand that.
I will have to wrap up probably in the next 10 minutes, but definitely not before we talk about abortion. It's one of my favorites.
Okay, great.
I'm pro-life across the board. I'm against abortion, and I think it should not be legal. And I think that our entire society needs to be more family friendly. And I think that would help the numbers on abortion go down. I think that people experiencing crisis pregnancies need support of all kinds, from family and from a network of friends and organizations that exist for that purpose. And I'd be the first to tell you that pregnancy is tough. I've had a few of them, and it's a very vulnerable stage of life for a person carrying a child. But that doesn't mean you get rid of the child. That means that you support the person carrying the child.
Absolutely. And then, of course, the pregnancy resource centers that actually do that stuff is getting firebombed.
Yep. Yeah, I'm very concerned about where this issue is going, particularly in our state, because I think that, well, I celebrated the overturning of Roe versus Wade. I do celebrate that. I think it has really galvanized people who want Roe versus Wade reinstated. And I think that it's going to be showing up in a lot of elections this cycle.
Yep. So my thing on abortion, and this is the way I make the argument. I'm pro-choice. The woman has a right to what to do with her own body.
I know where you're going.
She has a right to choose whether or not to have sex. She has a right
That's right.
to choose one of the 13 forms of birth control.
Yep.
And she now has the right to choose whether or not to use the morning after pill. But the underlying principles of our government is you can do whatever you want up until it affects another person.
Yeah. Well, it does.
And that's not your DNA. So
That's
that is
right.
affecting another person.
That's exactly right. And that is what my entire belief system around this issue boils down to, is that there is another human being with inherent rights involved.
Exactly. And now in this country, though, we have strongly ran towards the extreme of on religious freedom that we just abandon religion.
Right.
You're never going to get a 100% ban anywhere.
Agreed.
So now, again, I mentioned this before, the Constitution doesn't give the federal government any control over it.
Sure.
But if you're going to Congress, you're talking about federal level policy. So what do you think the federal government policy should be?
I would like to see a human life amendment. I would like to see unborn children defined as human beings with the full protection of the law.
I love that. Will never pass, but I love it.
I know.
So I'm actually a pastor too. So I'm all kinds of crazy. So
Oh, that's amazing.
all right, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up there because, like, as you can see, like anything that we cover, like, I'm not going to get into it. So if you want to be off in the next 10 minutes, we should probably wrap it here because I don't think I can squeeze anything else into the 5 minutes that's left in that.
I wish we could talk all night, but I'm meeting a friend for dinner that I scheduled before I scheduled you.
I understand completely. So, well, you enjoy your dinner. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that we can meet again. Be really cool if it ends up being we meet because you got elected the Senate and replaced Ted Cruz, who's not much of Republican because he's voted for a lot of the government taking control of things and spending a lot of money. So,
well, I have a lot to learn from you. I'd love to chat again.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks again. And we're going to go ahead and let Analisa go. Again, that's Analisa for the U.S. Senate in Texas. She is a write-in candidate, so you can write her in. She is confirmed. So if you do write her in, the vote will be counted. She's already registered to be counted.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, Analisa, and you have a great evening.
Okay, you too. Bye.
All right, guys. So we have actually another half an hour until the next interview starts. So we're going to go back out to the wonky music and the stream starting soon placard. If you guys can stick around because you got other stuff going on, you're welcome to do that. If not, that's fine too. So stand by here. Let me turn on the goofy music.